I came home with 2 paper grocery bags cutting into my palms, already thinking about a quiet evening, tea, a crime novel, maybe the balcony if the air stayed warm. My key stuck in the lock the way it always did, and when the door finally swung open, I froze. Someone was inside. Not a burglar, not a neighbor who'd gotten lost. Sienna, my daughter-in-law, stood in the center of my living room like she belonged there. 2 hard-shell suitcases sat upright beside her, still dusty from travel. She had her phone in one hand and that polished, put-together look she always managed, even on a random weekday afternoon. For a second, my brain tried to turn it into something harmless. Maybe she'd stopped by to drop something off. Maybe there was an emergency. But then I saw the guest room door down the hall cracked open, and a thin line of light spilling out like someone had already made themselves comfortable. I didn't step all the way in. I stayed in the doorway, grocery bags hanging from my arms, and asked the only question that made sense. "Did you ask before coming in?" My voice surprised me. Calm, steady. Not the shaky politeness I used to default to when someone overstepped. Sienna blinked, once, twice, then let out that small laugh she used when she wanted to make other people feel silly for bringing up something awkward. "Oh, Mara," she said, sing-song sweet. "I didn't hear you come in." "That's because I wasn't expected. This is my home, and you didn't answer my question." Her smile tightened at the corners. She glanced down at the bags, like my groceries were an inconvenience interrupting her day. "We're not doing anything strange," she said quickly. "Evan and I just need to stay here a little while." "We?" I repeated. She slid one suitcase a few inches with the toe of her shoe, nudging it closer to the wall, as if that made it less offensive. "Our place is getting work done. The contractors start at dawn. There's drilling, dust. We can't take meetings. We can't sleep. It's chaos." I walked in slowly, the way you approach something that might bite. I set the grocery bags on the dining table, and the canned goods inside clinked louder than they should have. Sienna's posture shifted at the sound. She took a small step back. "And you thought," I began, choosing my words, "that the solution was to move into my condo without asking?" She exhaled like I was being difficult on purpose. "Mara, it's not moving in, it's just for a few days." She said it like the phrase should smooth everything over. "You have the space. You're alone. You're not using it anyway." As if my life was an empty shelf waiting to hold their clutter. My fingers pressed into the edge of the table. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, not from fear, something closer to a long-delayed refusal finally standing straight.
"Does Evan know you're here?" I asked. Sienna's expression flickered, annoyance disguised as patience. "Of course he knows. It was his idea. He assumed you'd be fine with it." Assumed. My son, Evan, 41 years old, the baby I raised on overtime pay after his father left, the boy who once promised solemnly that when he grew up, he'd take care of me. Now he was apparently taking care by treating my home like an overflow storage unit. Sienna walked toward the guest room hall like the conversation was already over. "He's bringing the rest of our things later. I started setting up, so it's not a mess when he gets here." "You started setting up?" I repeated. She turned back, eyebrows lifted. "Why are you acting like this is a violation? We're family." Family. That word can be a warm blanket or a crowbar, depending on who's holding it. I opened my mouth to answer, really answer, with the full truth, when the lock clicked behind me. The front door swung wider. Evan stepped in carrying 2 duffel bags, cheerful as a man arriving at a hotel he'd prepaid. "Hey, Mom," he said brightly. "Perfect timing. Sienna filled you in, right?" He set the bags down beside the suitcases like they belonged there. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan, and I was the last person invited to know about it. Rehook. I stood there staring at my son's easy smile, and one thought landed hard in my chest. If I let this happen today, what will they take tomorrow? Evan looked around my living room like he was inspecting a space he'd always had access to. His shoulders were relaxed, his grin confident, the expression of someone who believed the situation was already settled. "Mom, it'll be quick," he said, nodding toward the suitcases. "A week, maybe 2, you won't even notice." I didn't return the smile. Sienna hovered behind him, arms folded now, her earlier sweetness replaced with the watchfulness of someone preparing for resistance. "You didn't ask," I said. Evan gave a short laugh like I'd teased him. "I called." "I called?" repeated. "Twice this morning," he said, almost proudly. "No answer, so I figured you were out. We'd get set up and be out of your hair." My throat tightened. "So when I didn't pick up, you took that as permission?" He waved a hand. "Mom, come on, we're not strangers." That sentence carried a whole history with it, because the truth was, he'd never treated me like a stranger. He'd treated me something more useful, a guarantee, a backup plan, a soft landing. Evan walked past me toward the kitchen. He opened the fridge without hesitation, found a bottle of sparkling water, and twisted the cap off. He drank as if the refrigerator and everything inside it belonged to all of us equally. It wasn't the water that bothered me. It was the ease, the complete absence of "may I" in any part of his body language. I watched him swallow, then cap the bottle and lean against the counter, totally at home. Sienna tried again with that conciliatory tone people use when they want to sound generous while they're actually cornering you. "We can contribute. Utilities, groceries, whatever. It's temporary." "It's not about money," I said. Evan frowned. "Then what is it about? Tell me what you want. We'll do it."
The old version of me would have softened at that, would have translated it into love, would have focused on the idea that he was willing to negotiate. But something in me had shifted the second I saw those suitcases. "What I wanted," I said quietly, "was for you to ask before you brought your life into my living room." Sienna's eyes narrowed slightly, then smoothed back into composure. "Mara, you make it sound like we're invading." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked down the hall to the guest room. Neither of them stopped me, which told me everything I needed to know. They didn't consider this an argument. They considered it a moment I'd eventually get over. The guest room door opened fully with a gentle push. And there it was. Evidence. Not a few days. Not a small inconvenience. Clothes were already laid across the quilt like a boutique display. Toiletries lined my dresser in tidy rows. Serums, sprays, cosmetics with labels I couldn't pronounce. A laptop sat open on the desk, its charger snaking to the wall outlet as if the room had always been meant for her. I stood still, absorbing it. The room smelled faintly different already. Sienna's perfume had begun rewriting the air. Evan appeared behind me, hands in his pockets. "See, we're organized. We're keeping it contained." "For 2 weeks," I said, turning. "This is your idea of contained?" He shrugged, annoyed now. "What did you expect? We both have work. We need to function." "And what about me?" I asked. He stared like the question hadn't occurred to him. I walked back into the living room. Sienna had taken my favorite chair by the window, my reading chair, the one I saved for and chose carefully after retirement, the one that held the shape of my evenings. She was scrolling on her phone like she was waiting for room service. When she noticed me, she popped up quickly, a little too quickly. "Oh, did you want to sit?" "It's not about the chair. It's about what it represents." Evan stepped into the room with that practiced tone he used at work, reasonable, managerial. "Mom, please, don't turn this into a big thing." "It is a big thing," I said. Sienna tilted her head, voice soft but sharp underneath. "It's strange to me that you'd rather be alone than help your own family." I felt the urge, familiar, trained, to explain myself until they approved my boundaries. Instead, I asked a simpler question. "If I showed up at your place with my bags and said I'd be staying for 2 weeks, would you welcome me without a conversation?" Evan opened his mouth, then hesitated. Sienna's gaze dropped for a half second. That half second was the truth. Evan recovered first. "That's different." "Why?" I asked, holding his eyes. Because I'm the mother? His jaw tightened. Because you're you. You're supposed to... To what? I cut in. To always make room? To always absorb the inconvenience? To always be available? A silence spread through the room, thick and electric. Evan looked at Sienna, and Sienna looked back, and I saw it, the couple's silent alliance forming against the difficult older woman. And I realized something else, too. If I didn't stop this now, I would be living inside their assumptions for the rest of my life. Rehook. Evan took a slow breath like he was losing patience, then asked the question that finally snapped in me. Mom, what do you even do all day that's so important?
What do you even do all day that's so important? Evan said it like he was asking about a hobby, like my days were blank pages he could scribble on whenever it suited him. I stared at him. Behind his eyes, I could see the boy he used to be, the one who believed his mother existed in the background, like electricity in the wall, always there, always powering everything, never needing anything back. I motioned toward the kitchen. Come talk to me, just you. Sienna didn't protest, but her expression tightened, as if she didn't like being left out of strategy. She stayed in the living room, arms crossed, listening with her whole body. Evan followed me into the kitchen and leaned against the counter again. Same stance, same entitlement, as if my home arranged itself around his comfort. Okay, he said, explain it to me. I took a moment before speaking, not because I didn't have words, because I had too many. You asked what I do all day, as if my life requires justification to deserve respect. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. You did, I replied. Maybe you didn't intend it, but you did. He sighed, frustrated. We just need a place to sleep. We're not asking for your kidney. And you're not hearing me, I said, my voice low. This isn't about sleeping. This is about assuming. It's about arriving with suitcases before you've received a yes. Evan's mouth tightened. It's my mom's house. I grew up thinking the door was always open. Yes, I said, and I'm finally realizing that I taught you something unhealthy. He blinked. Unhealthy? I turned the kettle on, more for something to do with my hands than because I needed tea. The click of the switch sounded loud in the tension. When was the last time you came here just to see me? I asked quietly. Evan's face shifted. Confusion first, then defensiveness. That's not fair. I call you. Do you? I asked. Or do you send a "you good" text while you're waiting for a meeting to start? I'm busy. I know you're busy. You've been busy for 20 years, but busy isn't the same as caring. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I kept going before my courage evaporated. You come when you need something. Dog-sitting, alone, a place to cool down after an argument. You don't come for me. You come for what I can do. Evan shook his head hard. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked. His face reddened. You're acting like I'm using you. My laugh was small, humorless. You are. And the worst part is, you don't even see it as using because you think you're entitled.
Evan's eyes sharpened. Entitled? I'm your son. And I'm your mother, I said, not your spare bedroom. The kettle began to hiss softly. In the living room, I heard Sienna's footsteps, slow pacing like a guard on watch. Evan lowered his voice. You're making this personal. It is personal, I replied. It's my home. He looked away, jaw working. We would have asked if you'd answered the phone. That's not asking. That's trying the door handle and walking in when it opens. His eyes snapped back to mine. So what, you want us to leave? Tonight? That's insane. I want you to understand you crossed a line, I said, and you didn't stumble over it. You stepped right over it like it wasn't there. Evan pushed off the counter and began pacing, mirroring Sienna without realizing it.
We're under stress. The renovations weren't supposed to take this long. The contractor messed up. We're exhausted. I nodded once. I understand stress. I understand exhaustion. I didn't say the rest out loud immediately. I understand it because I built my entire adulthood out of it. But the memories came anyway, sharp and detailed. Working back-to-back shifts after Evan's father disappeared, stretching a bag of rice for 3 dinners, letting Evan's friend sleep on my couch one summer because the kid had nowhere else to go, letting my sister stay just a month that became nearly a year. I had been the woman everyone counted on, and the bill came due in the form of my own invisibility. Evan stopped pacing. "You're making this like we're doing something horrible." "I broke into my peace," I said. He scoffed. "We didn't break in. We have keys." That hit hard, because it was literal and symbolic all at once. "Yes," I said softly, "you have keys, and you just proved you can't be trusted with them." His eyes widened. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, steadying my voice, "that the problem isn't just today. The problem is that you believed access was automatic." Evan's voice rose. "Families don't treat each other like strangers with permission slips. And healthy families," I said, "treat consent like love, not like a barrier." He stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. The kettle clicked off. I poured hot water into my mug, watching the tea darken, grounding myself in the ordinary. Then I set the mug down untouched. "I'm going to say this once," I told him. "You and Sienna cannot stay here." Evan's face drained of color. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said. From the living room, Sienna called out, "What's going on?" Evan didn't answer her. He looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time, no longer a fixture, no longer a guarantee, but a person capable of refusing him. Rehook. Evan walked back into the living room to tell Sienna, and I followed, because I knew the next 5 minutes would decide the future of our relationship.
Sienna stood when we entered the living room, her phone already in her hand, like she'd been preparing to document the moment or call someone for backup. Evan's face was tight. "Mom says we can't stay." Sienna's eyes snapped to mine. "Excuse me?" I kept my voice even. "You came without asking. You started unpacking. You're not guests. You're settlers." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she tried a softer approach. "Mara, we're in a bind. We thought you'd understand." "I do understand. I understand you assumed my answer would be yes, so you didn't bother to ask." Evan held out his hands in an appeal. "Mom, it's 2 weeks, maybe less." 2 weeks is 14 days, 14 mornings of negotiating my own kitchen, 14 nights of not fully relaxing in my own living room, 14 days of pretending I don't mind, because if I mind, I'm dramatic. Sienna's nostrils flared. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I asked. Evan stepped closer, his voice lower. "Okay, we should have asked. Fine, but we're already here. We brought stuff. You want us to go hunt for a hotel tonight?" "You're asking me to accept it because you already did it. That's not an apology. That's pressure." Sienna's tone sharpened. "You're acting like we're taking advantage of you." "You are," I said, meeting her eyes, "and you're using family as your excuse." Evan's face hardened. "So you'd rather we waste money on a hotel when you've got space sitting empty?" "There it is," I said quietly. "It's about saving money." Sienna jumped in fast. "We can pay you something. It's not like we want a free ride." "I don't want your money. I want a relationship where my consent matters." Evan shook his head, exasperated. "Why are you suddenly like this?"
I almost laughed at the word suddenly, as if I'd been a storm-free sky my whole life and only now decided to produce thunder. "I'm not suddenly like this," I said. "I'm finally speaking out loud." Sienna folded her arms. "What kind of mother tells her son no when he needs help?"
The kind who's tired of being treated like a convenience, I said. Evan's voice rose. You're kicking us out over a communication issue? It's not a communication issue, I said. It's a respect issue. He raked a hand through his hair, pacing. You're going to make everyone think you've lost it. I lifted my chin. Let them. Sienna's eyes flickered. Evan! He held up a hand to stop her, then faced me. Mom, listen. We're not trying to hurt you. We're stressed. We need a quiet place. We thought you'd be happy for company. Don't rewrite my loneliness into your permission slip, I said. Sienna's lips pressed into a thin line. So what now? You want us to drag everything back out and leave? Yes, I said, my voice steady enough that it almost startled me. The room went silent, like someone had turned the air heavy. Evan stared. You're serious? I am, I said. Sienna's voice turned pleading, but the words still carried accusation. Mara, please, don't do this. It'll break your relationship with your son. I looked at Evan and then back to her. If our relationship breaks because I set one boundary, then it wasn't a relationship, it was an arrangement. Evan's eyes flashed. So that's what you think I've done? Arranged you? I answered gently because cruelty wasn't the point. I think you stopped seeing me. His face twisted, hurt and anger tangled together. You know what? Fine, we'll go. He grabbed one suitcase handle with more force than necessary. The wheels thudded over the edge of my rug. Sienna didn't move immediately. She looked at me like something she couldn't categorize. I hope your quiet is worth it, she said softly. Evan spun back toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. His voice turned cold. Wait until the family hears about this. A familiar guilt stirred, the old reflex to fix, soothe, sacrifice. But another voice rose louder in me, older and steadier. Let them talk. I said, tell whoever you want. Tell them I asked to be respected in my own home. Evan's jaw clenched. You taught me family helps without conditions. I did, I admitted, and I taught you wrong. Sienna's eyes widened at that, like she hadn't expected me to name it so plainly. Evan yanked the door open. The hallway lights spilled in, bright and indifferent. They dragged the suitcases out. Just before Evan stepped into the hall, he looked back at me with something raw in his face. When you regret this, don't expect me to pretend it didn't happen. Then he left. Sienna followed, slower, and turned once at the threshold.
My phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, like it was impatient with me for standing still. I didn't check it right away. I just listened to the buildings settle around me, distant footsteps in the hall, an elevator ding, someone's muffled laughter through a wall. Ordinary life continuing, while mine felt split open. When I finally looked, the first message was from Evan. Hope your peace is worth it. The second was from Sienna. He's devastated. I don't think he'll forgive this. And then a name I hadn't expected so quickly. My sister Lena. Call me. Evan said something happened. Are you okay? Of course. He'd gone straight to the family telephone tree. For a moment, I felt the old panic, the need to defend myself before the story hardened into permanent myth, the fear of being branded the selfish mother who turned cold in old age. But my living room still smelled faintly of Sienna's perfume, and that scent pushed me forward. I walked down the hall to the guest room. Their things were still there, because in the rush of anger they hadn't taken everything. Clothes lay in drifts on the bed. Skincare bottles lined my dresser like they were claiming the surface. The laptop charger remained plugged into the wall, its tiny light blinking patiently, like it expected its owner to return. I didn't throw anything. I didn't slam drawers or crumple fabric. I simply started undoing the takeover. I folded each shirt neatly, paired the socks, put toiletries in a plastic bag so nothing leaked, coiled the charger carefully. I moved slowly, deliberately, like a person restoring a room after a storm. My hands trembled a little, not from regret exactly, but from adrenaline, from the unfamiliar act of holding my ground. When I finished, I placed everything in tidy stacks on the bed. If they came back for it, they'd find it ready. I wasn't trying to punish them. I was reclaiming myself without becoming someone I didn't recognize. Back in the living room, I sat in my reading chair, the one by the window. The evening light had faded into blue-gray. Apartment windows across the street blinked on one by one like quiet witnesses. I tried to exhale fully, but the breath snagged. Then the tears came. Not dramatic sobs, not movie scene wailing, just silent tears, warm on my cheeks, while my hands sat empty in my lap.
I cried for the younger me who thought love meant endless giving. I cried for the dozens of times I'd said yes because I was afraid no would make me unlovable. And I cried because even though I believed I'd done the right thing, it still hurt to have your own child look at you like you're a villain. I remembered my friend Nora from the community center, gone now, a year and a half in the ground. In her last month, she'd said something that lodged in my bones. People will spend your whole life eating from your table and still complain when you finally sit down. I hadn't understood it fully then. Now I did. I turned my phone face down and made tea. The kettle's hum filled the kitchen, the same kitchen Evan had walked into like he owned it. Steam rose. The mug warmed my palms. Ordinary comfort, stitched into a moment that didn't feel ordinary at all. I took one sip, then another. The tea tasted like steadiness. When my phone buzzed again, I let it buzz twice before I looked. Lena again. "Mara, please call. I'm worried." I stared at her name. Lena had lived with me for 8 months after her divorce. 8 months that began with "just until I get on my feet." I'd never complained. I'd never asked her to contribute much. I'd never admitted how crowded my mind felt, even when the condo was quiet, because I thought that's what good sisters did. Maybe I'd trained her, too. I didn't call that night. I couldn't handle someone else's opinion pressing down on me while I was still trying to stand upright in my own. I went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed Evan's face at the door. The pain, the fury, the disbelief. The way he looked like a man watching a familiar world change its rules. In the morning, sunlight washed across my bedroom as if nothing had happened. But when I walked into the hall and saw the guest room door, I remembered. Everything. I made coffee and sat at the window with the mug cradled in my hands. My phone lay on the table, quiet for the first time in hours. Then it lit up again. A new message from Evan. "I'm coming this afternoon to get the rest of our stuff. You don't need to be there." I read it twice, then once more. He wasn't asking. He was informing. I typed back, "I'll be home. Ring the bell." Then I set the phone down and stared into my coffee until it went cool. All day I kept busy cleaning things that weren't dirty, folding towels that were already folded, wiping counters that already shone. It wasn't about hygiene, it was about giving my hands somewhere to put their nervous energy. At noon, Lena called again. This time, I answered. Her voice came out fast, tangled in worry. "Mara, what on earth happened? Evan says you threw them out like strangers." I closed my eyes. "That's not what happened." "Then tell me," she said, "because he's furious." So I told her about coming home to suitcases, to an unpacked guest room, to assumptions planted like flags. I told her about Evan drinking from my fridge without looking at me, about Sienna in my chair, about "you have space" being used like a weapon. Lena listened, then sighed. "I understand why you're upset, but he's your son." "I know. That's why it hurts." "Couldn't you have just let them stay?" she asked gently, "to keep the peace?" I looked at the sunlight on my kitchen floor and answered honestly. I've kept the peace my entire life, and I'm tired." There was a long pause on the line. "I didn't know you felt that way," Lena said, quieter now. "Because I never said it," I replied. "But I'm saying it now." We ended the call without a neat resolution, just a soft heaviness, like a door left partly open. At 3 o'clock, I heard the elevator down the hall, then footsteps approaching my door. The bell rang. My heart thudded once hard. I stood up and opened the door. Rehook. Evan stood there alone, no Sienna, carrying empty bags, and the look on his face told me he hadn't come to argue. He'd come to measure the distance between us.
Sienna stood when we entered the living room, her phone already in her hand like she'd been preparing to document the moment or call someone for backup. Evan's face was tight. "Mom says we can't stay." Sienna's eyes snapped to mine. "Excuse me?" I kept my voice even. "You came without asking. You started unpacking. You're not guests, you're settlers." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she tried a softer approach. "Mara, we're in a bind. We thought you'd understand." "I do understand," I said. "I understand you assumed my answer would be yes, so you didn't bother to ask." Evan held out his hands in an appeal. "Mom, it's 2 weeks, maybe less." 2 weeks is 14 days, 14 mornings of negotiating my own kitchen, 14 nights of not fully relaxing in my own living room, 14 days of pretending I don't mind, because if I mind, I'm dramatic. Sienna's nostrils flared. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I asked. Evan stepped closer, his voice lower. "Okay, we should have asked. Fine. But we're already here. We brought stuff. You want us to go hunt for a hotel tonight? You're asking me to accept it because you already did it. That's not an apology. That's pressure." Sienna's tone sharpened. "You're acting like we're taking advantage of you." "You are," I said, meeting her eyes, "and you're using family as your excuse." Evan's face hardened. "So you'd rather we waste money on a hotel when you've got space sitting empty?" "There it is," I said quietly. "It's about saving money." Sienna jumped in fast. "We can pay you something. It's not like we want a free ride." "You think $50 makes it respectful?" I asked. Her cheeks flushed. "At least it shows we're trying." "I don't want your money," I said. "I want a relationship where my consent matters." Evan shook his head, exasperated. "Why are you suddenly like this?" I almost laughed at the word suddenly, as if I'd been a storm-free sky my whole life and only now decided to produce thunder.
In his eyes, I expected anger, pleading, maybe shame. There was only a profound, infinite weariness, the dull fatigue of a man fighting a daily battle for the most basic scraps. He opened his mouth, perhaps to shout, perhaps to call out. His lips trembled. He took a half-step forward, a gesture of utter defeat. I didn't turn away. I didn't speed up. I simply slid my gaze over him, as one might regard a lamppost or a random passerby, present but insignificant to my journey. My face remained a mask of calm neutrality. Nothing trembled inside. No pity, no gloating, just the cold, hard fact. Everyone gets what they deserve. He wanted luxury without labor, beauty without burden. Now he worked dirty to survive. The scales, finally, felt balanced. He didn't run after me. He just stood there, a solitary figure under the harsh car wash lights, watching me walk on. Perhaps the foreman yelled at him to get back to work. Perhaps the weight of his choices finally settled upon him. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. A chance encounter with Marco reduced to washing cars. Is this the end of the story? Or is his final desperate act about to shatter the fragile peace? What message awaits your phone? The notification was from an unknown number. I opened it, bracing myself. "Ma, please, I can't take it anymore. I understand everything now. Give me a chance, even just $10 for food. Please." Ma. The word, once the most precious sound in the world, now felt hollow, stripped of its meaning, just letters on a screen. Chance. I had given him hundreds. chances to be a good son, a good husband, a decent man. He had spent every single one on destroying the life of the woman who now called me Mom, on feeding his own vices, on lying and stealing. He hadn't just squandered opportunities, he'd actively chosen destruction. My finger hovered over the reply button. What could I possibly write? Endure it, son. God will provide? He had made his God the roulette wheel, the bottle, the easy lie. I forgive you? Forgiveness felt like a betrayal of Lucia's suffering, of the years I'd poured into raising him only to watch him become a parasite, of the sheer exhausting effort it took to claw her back from the brink he pushed her towards. I thought of him on his knees in the hospital corridor, the theatrical tears, the crocodile pleas. I thought of the journal, the stolen earrings, the turned-off heat. I thought of Lucia's terrified eyes when he reached for her in the ICU. This wasn't a son in need. This was the architect of his own ruin, still expecting the safety net he'd spent years tearing down. My thumb moved, not to reply, not to engage. I tapped the settings icon, selected Block Contact, then Delete Chat. The screen blinked, the thread vanished. The last frayed thread connecting me to the ghost of the boy he'd been snapped. I put the phone back in my pocket, the cheap plastic casing suddenly cold. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the crisp autumn air. Ahead, the warm glow of Mama Lucia's bakery beckoned. The smell of cinnamon and yeast, rich and sweet, washed over me as I pushed open the door. I bought 2 pain au chocolat, the flaky pastry still warm. Walking back, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. I wasn't carrying just pastries, I was carrying peace. Hard-won, fiercely protected peace. For Lucia, for myself. The past was a lesson, not a life sentence. I had chosen to save a stranger who became family. Now I could finally breathe.
My phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, like it was impatient with me for standing still. I didn't check it right away. I just listened to the building settle around me. Distant footsteps in the hall, an elevator ding, someone's muffled laughter through a wall. Ordinary life continuing, while mine felt split open. When I finally looked, the first message was from Evan. Hope your peace is worth it. The second was from Sienna. He's devastated. I don't think he'll forgive this. And then a name I hadn't expected so quickly. My sister, Lena. Call me. Evan said something happened. Are you okay? Of course, he'd gone straight to the family telephone tree. For a moment, I felt the old panic, the need to defend myself before the story hardened into permanent myth, the fear of being branded the selfish mother who turned cold in old age. But my living room still smelled faintly of Sienna's perfume, and that scent pushed me forward. I walked down the hall to the guest room. Their things were still there, because in the rush of anger they hadn't taken everything. Clothes lay in drifts on the bed. Skincare bottles lined my dresser like they were claiming the surface. The laptop charger remained plugged into the wall, its tiny light blinking patiently like it expected its owner to return. I didn't throw anything. I didn't slam drawers or crumple fabric. I simply started undoing the takeover. I folded each shirt neatly, paired the socks, put toiletries in a plastic bag so nothing leaked, coiled the charger carefully. I moved slowly, deliberately, like a person restoring a room after a storm. My hands trembled a little, not from regret exactly, but from adrenaline, from the unfamiliar act of holding my ground. When I finished, I placed everything in tidy stacks on the bed. If they came back for it, they'd find it ready. I wasn't trying to punish them. I was reclaiming myself without becoming someone I didn't recognize. Back in the living room, I sat in my reading chair, the one by the window. The evening light had faded into blue-gray. Apartment windows across the street blinked on one by one like quiet witnesses. I tried to exhale fully, but the breath snagged. Then the tears came,
Not dramatic sobs, not movie scene wailing, just silent tears, warm on my cheeks, while my hands sat empty in my lap. I cried for the younger me who thought love meant endless giving. I cried for the dozens of times I'd said yes because I was afraid no would make me unlovable. And I cried because even though I believed I'd done the right thing, it still hurt to have your own child look at you like you're a villain. I remembered my friend Nora from the community center, gone now, a year and a half in the ground. In her last months, she'd said something that lodged in my bones. People will spend your whole life eating from your table and still complain when you finally sit down. I hadn't understood it fully then.
Now I did. I turned my phone face down and made tea. The kettle's hum filled the kitchen. The same kitchen Evan had walked into like he owned it. Steam rose. The mug warmed my palms. Ordinary comfort, stitched into a moment that didn't feel ordinary at all. I took one sip, then another. The tea tasted like steadiness. When my phone buzzed again, I let it buzz twice before I looked. Lena again. "Mara, please call. I'm worried." I stared at her name. Lena had lived with me for 8 months after her divorce. 8 months that began with "just until I get on my feet." I'd never complained. I'd never asked her to contribute much. I'd never admitted how crowded my mind felt, even when the condo was quiet, because I thought that's what good sisters did. Maybe I'd trained her too. I didn't call that night. I couldn't handle someone else's opinion pressing down on me while I was still trying to stand upright in my own. I went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed Evan's face at the door, the pain, the fury, the disbelief, the way he looked like a man watching a familiar world change its rules. In the morning, sunlight washed across my bedroom as if nothing had happened. But when I walked into the hall and saw the guest room door, I remembered. Everything. I made coffee and sat at the window with the mug cradled in my hands. My phone lay on the table, quiet for the first time in hours. Then it lit up again. A new message from Evan. "I'm coming this afternoon to get the rest of our stuff. You don't need to be there." I read it twice, then once more. He wasn't asking, he was informing. I typed back, "I'll be home. Ring the bell." Then I set the phone down and stared into my coffee until it went cool. All day I kept busy cleaning things that weren't dirty, folding towels that were already folded, wiping counters that already shone. It wasn't about hygiene, it was about giving my hands somewhere to put their nervous energy. At noon, Lena called again. This time, I answered. Her voice came out fast, tangled in worry. "Mara, what on earth happened? Evan says you threw them out like strangers." I closed my eyes. "That's not what happened." "Then tell me," she said, "because he's furious." So I told her about coming home to suitcases, to an unpacked guest room, to assumptions planted like flags. I told her about Evan drinking from my fridge without looking at me, about Sienna in my chair, about "you have space" being used like a weapon. Lena listened, then sighed. "I understand why you're upset, but he's your son." "I know," I said. "That's why it hurts." "Couldn't you have just let them stay?" she asked gently. "To keep the peace." I looked at the sunlight on my kitchen floor and answered honestly. "I've kept the peace my entire life," I said, "and I'm tired." There was a long pause on the line. "I didn't know you felt that way," Lena said, quieter now. "Because I never said it, but I'm saying it now." We ended the call without a neat resolution, just a soft heaviness, like a door left partly open. At 3 o'clock, I heard the elevator down the hall, then footsteps approaching my door. The bell rang. My heart thudded once, hard. I stood up and opened the door. Rehook. Evan stood there alone, no Sienna, carrying empty bags, and the look on his face told me he hadn't come to argue.
He'd come to measure the distance between us. Evan stood in the doorway with 2 canvas tote bags slung over his shoulder, the kind you bring to pack up a life quickly. His expression was flat, controlled in a way that made him seem older, not younger. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I answered, stepping back. "Come in." He walked past me without looking around this time, without the casual confidence from the day before. He headed straight down the hall to the guest room, like a man following a route he'd memorized. I didn't follow. I stayed in the living room, hands clasped, listening to the soft sounds of him gathering what was left. Zippers closing, hangers clacking, a drawer sliding in. For a moment, I imagined a different version of this day, one where I'd caved, where Sienna was still in my chair and Evan was still in my kitchen, and my home had become a place I navigated carefully. The thought steadied me. Evan emerged 10 minutes later with both tote bags full, straps biting into his shoulders. He paused near the door, shifting his weight. "Can I use the bathroom before I go?" he asked. The question should have been simple. It was polite, normal, and yet it pierced me because it revealed how quickly things had changed. Yesterday, he'd opened my fridge like he owned it. Today, he had to ask to use the restroom. "Of course," I said. He set the bags down by the door and walked into the bathroom. I heard the faucet run, a cabinet door click. The hand towel moved. Standing there, I felt 2 truths at once. I loved my son. Love didn't mean surrender. Evan came out, drying his hands. He picked up the bags again, then hesitated at the threshold. His voice was careful. Is there anything you want to say?" There were 100 things I could have said, apologies I didn't believe in, explanations he'd already dismissed, pleas for him not to hate me. But instead, I chose the truest thing. "I love you, but I'm not going back to being the person who has to disappear to keep you comfortable." His jaw tightened, his eyes flickered, like he wanted to argue, but the fight wasn't there anymore, only the bruise. "So that's it?" he said quietly. "It's not that's it. It's a new beginning, if you're willing. One where you ask. One where I'm allowed to say yes or no without being punished for it." He nodded once, short and stiff. "Okay," he said. And then, with a final look that held more sadness than rage, he stepped into the hall. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Evan." The door clicked shut. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the door as if it might speak. Then I walked back to the guest room. The bed was bare again, the dresser empty, the air slowly turning back into mine. I sat on the edge of the mattress and pressed my hand to the quilt, feeling how quiet a room can be when it's no longer waiting for someone else. The next few days passed strangely, my routine intact, but with an ache underneath it, like a healing wound you keep noticing. Lena called twice. The first time she sounded worried. The second time she sounded thoughtful. "I've been thinking," she said on the 3rd day, "about when I stayed with you after my divorce." I said nothing, letting her find her way to whatever she needed to say. "I didn't ask enough," she admitted. "I didn't check in with you. I assumed you were fine because you always looked fine." My throat tightened. "I wanted you to be okay," I said, "so I made myself small." "I'm sorry," Lena said. "I really am." Her apology didn't fix Evan, but it mattered because it meant someone had heard me without turning it into a debate. 2 weeks went by with no word from my son. Then a message arrived, just a photo of him and Sienna in front of newly painted walls, smiling in their renovated condo. Text beneath it, "Back home, work's finally done." No "how are you?" No "I'm sorry," no warmth, but also no silence. I replied simply, "Glad you're settled. Take care." No response came. Life continued, and slowly, to my surprise, the guilt didn't grow. It shrank. In its place was a quiet steadiness, the feeling of living in my own skin without constantly bracing for someone else's needs. Then, one afternoon at the grocery store, my phone rang. Not a text, a call. Evan's name lit up the screen. My heart jumped like it used to when he was a teenager, and I didn't know if the call would bring trouble. I stepped away from the produce aisle and answered. Hello? Rehook. Evan's voice sounded different, careful, almost humbled, and the first thing he said made me grip the phone like it might slip from my hand. Mom, I think I owe you an apology.
Mom, I think I owe you an apology. For a second, I couldn't speak, not because I didn't want to, but because my body didn't trust hope. Hope can be a trick when you've spent years being disappointed in quiet ways. I leaned my card against the end of the aisle and kept my voice neutral on purpose. I'm listening. There was traffic noise on his end, like he was walking outside. He cleared his throat. I've been replaying that day, he said, and I keep getting stuck on the part where you came home with groceries and Sienna was already unpacking. I didn't interrupt. He continued, slower now. It wasn't right. I didn't ask. I assumed, and when you got upset, I acted like you were the problem. My eyes stung unexpectedly. I blinked hard and stared at a display of apples until the red stopped blurring. Thank you, I said quietly. That's what I needed to hear. I'm not saying you handled it perfectly, he added quickly, like he was afraid of giving me too much. Kicking us out, it shocked me. I know, it shocked me too. A pause stretched between us. Then he said something I didn't expect. Sienna and I talked, a lot. She said something that made me mad at first, but I think she was right. What did she say? That I treat you like you're built in, he admitted. Like you're not a person with limits, like you're a service I can access because you love me. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the words land. I do love you, I said, and love isn't permission. I'm starting to get that, he replied. He hesitated again, then asked, Would you like lunch with me? Just us, no Sienna. I want to talk without the drama. The invitation was simple, but it felt like a doorway cracked open. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how quickly it came out. I would. When I hung up, I stood in the grocery store aisle for a long moment, breathing like I'd just come up from underwater. I finished shopping in a daze, not unhappy, just full of the possibility that maybe boundaries didn't have to mean permanent loss. Saturday came. I changed outfits twice before settling on a simple dress and cardigan, something that made me feel like myself, not like someone trying to win an argument. At the restaurant, I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table by the window. Evan walked in right on time. He looked tired, not just busy adult tired, something deeper, like he'd been doing emotional work and it had left bruises. He slid into the booth across from me and gave a small, awkward smile. Hi. Hi, I answered, matching his tone. We ordered. Small talk first. His job, my book club, the weather pretending to be summer. It was clumsy, but there was effort in it. Effort matters. Halfway through the meal, Evan set his fork down and looked at me directly. I started seeing someone, he said. My stomach tightened. A doctor? He shook his head. A therapist. I blinked, startled, then strangely relieved. How is it? He exhaled. Hard. Humbling. He traced a small circle on the table with his fingertip, not quite meeting my eyes. I always thought being a good son meant providing, calling, showing up at holidays. I never thought it meant asking you how you feel when it has nothing to do with me. I stayed quiet, giving him room. He finally looked up. His eyes were wet, but he didn't look away. I've seen you as Mom first, he said, voice rough, and Mara last, and I'm sorry. My throat tightened so much I had to swallow before I could speak. Thank you, I managed. That means more than you know. He nodded, like he'd expected me to argue but was relieved I didn't. I don't want us to go back to how it was, because now I see how it was. I took, and you gave. and I called it normal. It was normal, I said softly, for a long time, in a lot of families. He sighed. Yeah, and I don't want that normal anymore. We talked for almost 2 hours about keys and boundaries, about calling before coming over, about the difference between help and entitlement. We didn't solve everything, but we did something better. We told the truth without trying to win.
When we stood outside the restaurant, Evan hugged me, longer than usual, tighter, like he was trying to hold on to a new kind of understanding. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. "Thank you for asking," I replied. He gave a small, genuine smile. "I'll call you this week, just to talk." I watched him walk away, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not relief exactly, hope, with boundaries. I thought the worst was behind us, until Evan mentioned the upcoming family dinner and asked, cautiously, "So about holidays at your place, are we still welcome?" The week after lunch, Evan did call, not to request anything, not to check in with one eye on his schedule. He called while walking home from work, and we talked about nothing important. His annoying coworker, the new cafe near my building, the ridiculous price of eggs. Ordinary conversation, the kind that builds a relationship slowly and honestly. And I noticed something else. I wasn't bracing myself. For years, whenever his name flashed on my phone, part of me tightened, preparing to be needed. Now I answered without that familiar dread. It wasn't perfect, nothing changes overnight, but it was different. Then, as if the universe wanted to test the new ground we were standing on, Evan called one evening and said, "Hey Mom, quick question." My stomach did a small flip. I kept my voice steady. "Go ahead." He paused, like he was choosing words carefully. "Sienna's parents are coming into town next month. We're hosting them, but it's a lot. Sienna wants to do a family dinner. She asked if we could do it at your place because you have more room." Ah, there it was. The old pattern knocking politely this time, dressed up as a quick question. I didn't answer immediately, not because I wanted to punish him, because I wanted to answer as the new version of myself. "That's not a quick question," I said, finally. "That's a real request." "I know," he admitted, "and I'm trying to do it right." I appreciated that honesty. I asked, when would it be, how many people, and what exactly does hosting mean? Who cooks, who cleans, what time does it start and end? Evan let out a breath that sounded half relieved, half nervous. "Okay, thank you. It would be 8 people, we'd bring food, we'd clean, and you can say no. I'm serious." 8 people in my condo meant noise, dishes, small talk that drained me. But it also meant I wasn't being ambushed. I was being asked. I thought about my limits and my wants. "I'll do it," I said, "with conditions." "Name them," he said immediately. "No surprise arrivals," I said. "A start time and an end time. You handle the food, you handle cleanup, and no one stays overnight." "Done," he said, quick and sincere. "Thank you." When I hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, noticing something important. I'd said yes without resentment, because yes had been chosen, not extracted. The dinner arrived a month later. Sienna's parents were pleasant, loud, affectionate, the kind of people who take up space without apologizing. In the past, that would have sent me into silent endurance mode. But this time, Evan checked in with me twice during the evening. "You okay? And want me to wrap things up soon?" Not in a performative way, in a respectful way. At 9:30, he clapped his hands lightly and said, "All right, everyone, we're going to start winding down." And he meant it. By 10:15, they were gone. Sienna helped dry dishes. Evan took out the trash. They didn't linger like my home was theirs.
When the door shut behind the last guest, Sienna surprised me by turning back and saying, "Thank you. I know I didn't start off on the right foot." It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. She nodded, then followed Evan out. After they left, I sat in my chair by the window and listened to the quiet return, like the condo exhaled. The quiet didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like ownership. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Evan. "Thanks again," and "I'm proud of us." I stared at the words, then typed back, "Me too." I didn't cry. I just sat with the feeling. Soft, steady, earned. Because boundaries hadn't destroyed my relationship with my son. They'd forced it to grow up. And I realized something else, too. The person who struggled most with my boundaries wasn't Evan or Sienna. It was the old version of me, the one who believed love required self-erasure. That version still lived inside me, sometimes whispering, "Don't be difficult, don't make waves, don't risk being left." But now I had another voice that answered back. If I have to disappear to be loved, it isn't love. Rehook. I thought I'd finally learned to live with that truth, until an unexpected call from Lena revealed what the rest of the family had been saying about me behind my back.
Lena called on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice hesitant. "Mara," she began, "I need to tell you something, and you might not like it." I set down my book. "Tell me." She exhaled slowly. "People have been talking about what happened with Evan and Sienna. You know how it goes. One person tells a story and then it grows legs." I felt a flicker of irritation, but it didn't swallow me the way it used to. "What are they saying?" Lena hesitated. "That you've gotten hard, that you're pushing Evan away, that you care more about your apartment than your son." There it was, the moral judgment dressed up as concern, the ancient expectation that mothers must be endlessly available or they're failures. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. "And what do you think?" "I think," Lena said carefully, "that I didn't understand at first, but I do now, especially after you reminded me about my divorce year." I stayed quiet. Lena continued, more firmly. "I told them the truth, that Evan showed up with suitcases without asking, that you weren't cruel, you were overdue." My chest loosened slightly. "Thank you." "I also told them," she added, "that you're not a resource, you're a person." I swallowed hard. "That means a lot." There was a pause. Then Lena said, "Evan called me too, a few weeks ago." My stomach tightened. "What did he say?" "He apologized, not just for the suitcases, for years of taking you for granted." I closed my eyes. "He's trying." "I can tell, and I think you're both doing something most families never do. You're changing the rules." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, letting the truth settle. Even when you set boundaries kindly, some people will still paint you as the villain, because your boundary forces them to confront what they've been benefiting from. That weekend, Evan called again. "Mom," he said, "I heard some family members are still making comments." I didn't sound surprised. Lena told me. "I'm sorry," he said, and I could hear genuine frustration in his voice. "I didn't realize how much the whole Saint Mother story was wrapped around you. People liked you best when you were convenient." I let out a small laugh. "Yes, they did." He was quiet a moment, then said, "I told Uncle Ray to stop. I told him he wasn't there and he doesn't get to judge you." My throat tightened. "Thank you." Evan added, "I want you to know I'm not doing this because I feel guilty. I'm doing it because I want to be better. I want my future kids, if I have them, to grow up seeing respect in action." That line hit me in a place I didn't expect. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was generational. A chance to stop passing the same silent damage down the line. "I'm proud of you," I told him. He exhaled, like he'd been holding tension all week. "That means a lot." We talked a bit more. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" I smiled slightly. "You always do." He chuckled. "Yeah, but I'm trying to do it right. Are you okay with us having keys to your place?" Ah, the keys. The symbol of the whole mess. I didn't answer quickly. I thought about what the keys had meant before. Unlimited access. An open door that didn't require my consent. Then I thought about what they could mean now. Trust with boundaries. "Yes," I said finally. "You can keep them, but I want one rule." "Anything," he said. "No using them unless you've spoken to me first," I replied. "No, I called and you didn't answer, so I came anyway. If I don't respond, it means wait." "Agreed," he said immediately. "No exceptions." After we hung up, I walked to the small dish by the entryway where I kept my spare keys. I held them in my palm for a moment. It felt strange, this idea that I could give trust without giving myself away. But that's what healthy relationships are, I realized. Not locked doors, not open doors with no rules, just doors with consent. I thought we'd finally found a new normal, until Sienna called me directly for the first time and said, "Mara, can we talk? Just us?" When Sienna called, I almost didn't answer, not because I wanted to hold a grudge, but because I didn't know what version of her I'd get, the polished invader from that first day, or the quieter woman who'd helped dry dishes after the family dinner. I answered on the third ring. "Hello, Sienna." Her voice sounded smaller than I was used to. "Hi, Mara. Do you have a minute?" "I do," I said carefully. She paused, then spoke with effort. "I wanted to say I handled that situation badly. The suitcase thing. I told myself it was temporary, that it was fine because you had space. But the truth is, I didn't want to pay for a hotel, and I didn't want to deal with the stress at home, so I made it your problem. I didn't interrupt. I let her own it." She continued, "I also didn't like being told no. I'm used to solving things quickly, and I treated your home like a solution, not like your life." My chest tightened, but not with anger this time, more like recognition. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. It wasn't only about the inconvenience, it was about being treated like my consent didn't matter. "I get that now," she said, voice steadier. "And Evan, he's been trying. I see it, so I figured I should try too." There was silence on the line, not awkward, just honest. Then she said, "I don't expect you to be my best friend, but I do want us to be okay." "I want that too," I said. We didn't suddenly become close, but the air shifted, less wariness, more respect. After the call, I sat by my window and watched the late afternoon light soften on the buildings across the street. The city looked the same as it always had. Busy, indifferent, alive.
But inside me, something had changed permanently. For most of my life, I thought the goal was harmony. No conflict, no discomfort, no tense conversations. I thought a good mother was one who smoothed everything over, who absorbed stress so everyone else could stay comfortable. Now I understood the cost of that kind of harmony. It asks one person to vanish so everyone else can feel at home. My home is quiet again, not empty, quiet. And when Evan visits now, he texts first. When he's running late, he tells me. When he needs help, he asks. And when I can't do it, I say so without building a mountain of excuses. Sometimes I still feel that old tug of guilt, especially when the family gossip drifts back to me, or when I remember Evan's face at the door that first night. But then I remember the other face I saw more recently. Evan at lunch, eyes wet, saying, "I'm sorry," like it mattered. I think about how love changes when it finally includes respect. And I think about how late it can feel to start living for yourself, until you realize late is still better than never. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, if you've been the default helper, the constant giver, the one people rely on without asking, here's what I learned the hard way. A boundary isn't cruelty. A boundary is clarity.
It tells the people who love you how to love you well. And if someone can't handle your boundaries, it doesn't always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it just means they benefited from you having none. And just when I thought our family had finally settled into this new respect, Evan asked me one more question, one that tested everything we'd learned. "Mom, would you ever consider moving closer to us?"